Most of us don't know who Gregory Johnson is, but we know what he did. In Dallas, Texas in 1984, outside the Republican National Convention, Gregory Johnson was arrested for burning the American flag. Why did you go to Dallas?
To make a strong political statement of contempt and hatred for everything that was going on with that convention.
Do you recognize that people are so irritated with what you have done in supporting the burning of the American flag that they cannot listen to your message, whatever it is?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, but that ought to raise another question. Like, why is it that people are trained to have this emotional, like, knee-jerk reaction, you know, to the burning of a piece of cloth?
It's the symbol of our country.
Yeah, but that's the point. The content of the symbolism is what's being disputed and debated. Maybe I offend Jim and Tammy Baker, like, so what? You know, I don't care. Maybe I offend some people need to be offended. Anarchy! There was an encampment down by a toxic river that flows through downtown Dallas. And we had meetings in the encampment to, like, well, what are we going to do? Because the atmosphere was very repressive. You know, there was, like, wall-to-wall police. They were just busting people for jaywalking. They said jaywalking was the first step towards anarchy. We went through the financial district of downtown Dallas, and we had what we called die-ins, simulating the effects of a nuclear attack, and everybody would, like, count down 10, 9, 8. And to disrupt the business-as-usual atmosphere of these corporations.
Would you agree that people think that you're some crazy wacko?
Not all people. You know, I think a lot of people are very politically challenged and stuff and excited to see that there's people out here resisting against the system.
Are you dangerous? Are you dangerous?
I think to the powers that be.
Are you a communist?
Yeah, revolutionary communist.
Let's fight the power! Ah!
It was revolution that 13 years ago led Johnson to join a little-known group called the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade. But the protester with no permanent address, the man who battled the courts for the right to symbolic free speech, is reluctant to talk about one thing, himself. How do you live?
We talked about that already.
No, we didn't.
It's been a struggle, you know. I mean, for the most part, for years, I've worked while I do my political activity.
You're not working right now.
Not right now.
So you stay with friends?
Yeah.
You don't have a home of your own?
No, and if I did, you think I'd sit here and say, where? You know, I just, you know, I have a life, you know.
You do?
Yeah. I'm not a monk, okay?
Does your mother want you to go and get a job and have a color TV and car and things like that?
This is getting a little too personal.
Does she agree with you that it's right to burn the American flag?
She wouldn't do that herself, no. But she thinks that somebody ought to have the right to do it.
As a child, it was Johnson's mother who provided the major influence, while his father was mostly absent, in jail for financial crimes. Gregory Johnson looked around, and bit by bit, what he saw radicalized him.
I saw a lot of stuff that maybe a white person wouldn't normally see if they, you know, because of the way this society is all divided up, you know.
My mother worked full-time and had 3 boys. At the time, I think she made $50, $60 a week. Didn't go very far. We moved down the economic ladder from a middle-class neighborhood where we lived as a family to a lower-class neighborhood.
I grew up in this mixed ghetto with black youth all around me, and, you know, that was a good thing, you know, because my mother was in the NAACP. And that was pretty radical at the time for a white woman. People would mess with her for that. And even though I was real young, you know, 8, 9 years old, I knew what I felt about racism, you know. I hated it.
There was a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness, particularly on the part of our mother, towards the establishment or towards the falsehoods that come with broken promises and broken marriages. And that anger manifested itself from mother to children.
Then my mother married this guy in the military, and then we went to West Germany, and my stepfather was, like, stationed over there, and ironically I had a job selling the Stars and Stripes newspapers in the mess halls to these GIs, right? And this was, like, at a time when the disgust with the Vietnam War was at a high tide. And the determination of a lot of these GIs that they weren't going to fight in the war was pretty intense. That radicalized me in a lot of ways.
And how old were you then?
I was only 12 years old.
Here you were, 12 years old. Other kids are out playing baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about political issues?
Well, I don't know. How old are you?
43.
Okay. Well, you know what it was like then,
Sure.
right? I mean, people were much more politicized, you know. They weren't just playing baseball. I'm just saying this was a world that, you know, I was coming up in. I was too young for the 60s. I kind of more caught the backlash of it.
Do you think you were born too late?
No. I'm looking forward to the 90s.
Do you think you got your message across joining in that demonstration and burning the American
Yeah,
flag?
definitely. And I think there was a lot of people that were very inspired by the demonstration.
As it progressed and their activities became more criminal in behavior, then I think, you know, it dawned on all of us that, you know, the confrontation that we had worked so diligently to avoid was certainly coming.
Then they went through a hotel, dipped their finger in some soup and licked it. I came in at about that time, because Dallas felt the intense pressure of knowing that the world was watching. In fact, that was part of the war cry of the protesters, the whole world is watching. And indeed they were. It proceeded through the streets where there was spray painting. A fellow with a skateboard that had a great disliking for newspaper boxes, and 95 people or more coming en masse into Neiman Marcus, screaming, "Let's go shopping," and eat the rich.
I think their method is to behave in any fashion that they think will attract the media attention. And I think that when normal activities such as marching and parading fail to gain that kind of attention, then they resort to less conventional behavior, and that's what happened in Dallas. But I also think that their intent was to create an arrest situation so that there would be some more attention, and they certainly got it.
Did you want to be arrested in Dallas?
No.
You've been arrested so many times, 20 sometimes,
Right.
all over the country. So it seems to be sort of a pattern.
The pattern is on the part of the police.
UC Berkeley, 1985. When 500 people gathered for an anti-apartheid demonstration, Gregory Johnson was more than just a face in the crowd.
Well, Gregory Johnson was one of the last 40 to be arrested. They were a group that was going to fight any effort to remove him from the steps. There does appear to be a group that travel around that are looking for causes, and they're looking for the media attention.
Aren't you really just a professional protester?
No, I think that's a crude way of putting it. Look at all my arrests. Every one of them has been for something political. In Atlanta, the
All right,
arrest
a
you had-
professional political protester.
All right, your words.
At demonstrations in Atlanta, where he's been arrested at least 8 times, Johnson is often remembered not for his message, but for his manner.
The word pig comes to mind. It was common practice to be called that years before that, say in the early 70s. But I hadn't heard that term used quite that much that night. He seemed to like the term. Seemed to make him happy.
I think he's still using the judicial system to his advantage. He's using the American way to beat the Americans with it.
Here's the question that everybody always asks you. If you don't like this country, why don't you leave it?
Because I'd rather stay here and make a contribution to revolution.
Is it going to be a violent revolution?
Yeah,
Do you advocate violence?
I think it's going to come down to a revolutionary
Do
war.
you advocate violence?
Yeah, I'm advocating that it'll come down to a revolutionary war.
Did you plan to desecrate the American flag, to burn a flag?
No, actually, I think it was pretty spontaneous.
You didn't discuss it at all?
Mm-mm.
Honestly?
No. It was at the end of the demonstration. There were flags that had been displayed on the streets in front of these banks and corporate headquarters.
And they began grabbing them and pulling them over and, of course, bending the poles. One of those flags that they had removed, they did try to burn right there on the spot, but they don't light very easily. You really need to add lighter fluid to them or something to get them to flame, because I've covered other marches where they've tried to burn other flags, and I think they were all a little bit surprised at first that a single match doesn't start them up quite that easily.
The thing about this is I didn't actually ignite it. You know, I don't know if you know
You
that.
didn't?
No.
I don't know of anyone who actually saw it. I turned around, the flag was burning, and there were people gathered around it, but Johnson, at least in my photographs, is not among that number.
Now, I had seen flag burning before, and so, you know, it wasn't a major event. I don't think anybody anticipated that the long court battles and the end result would be determined by this particular case.
And it wasn't just a thing of making the headlines. We were making a political statement.
Why couldn't you have just made the political statement without burning the American flag?
Because y'all don't pay any attention to it.